Started off with Johnny Clegg and Savuka and A Cruel, Crazy, Beautiful World. Following on there, that is Stand For and Wishing You Well. And talking about wishing well, good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Jerry. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. And yourself?
I'm doing great, fortunately. A lot of work. I would be really sad otherwise. So, yeah.
And you're wearing a jacket.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to look nice for you.
Oh, it's very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, what were you up to last week?
Well, as I said, lots of work, not only with my usual day job, but also with my show Tecnología, Alcance y Solución, which is on RPC on Thursdays at 7 p.m. So if you speak Spanish or understand Spanish and you like technology, I'm there for you. Today, we're probably going to talk about, I think it's smart cities, or was it women in tech? I can't keep up. I've recorded several shows in advance. So we take a topic every week and we just dive deep into who are the makers and breakers of news in that regard. We've talked about technology in theater and television, culture and arts. We've talked about women in tech. We're also going to talk about how the internet got started in Panama some time ago. So that's going to be interesting. Be sure to not miss it. But if you do miss it, it's on the Medcom website. So you find Medcom and Tecnología on Google, and it'll take you right there. Also, you can follow me on Spotify. I also, upload all of our nice chats from the breakfast show and everything else that I do online up to Spotify, so you can enjoy it in the car as well, or when you're doing your morning walk or anything like that. So, keep a lookout for that if you're into technology as I am.
Okay. Well, that's taken up all the time for this morning. I tell you one thing which I have done a little bit based on your advice. Then I went away and did my due diligence. The new Linksys routers.
Did you?
Yeah, I haven't. It only arrived yesterday, so I haven't got it set up yet. I'll do that over the weekend. But I just suddenly realized that I thought, okay, so I've got to go and reset every single plug, every single thing that I have, which is linked to my current router, which is probably going to take most of the weekend, I think.
Okay. One thing you can do in that regard is to set up your existing Linksys router with the same, network name and password and everything else as the previous one. That's what I've done so far. Never had any issues.
So it'll just automatically connect, because I wanted to do that anyway if it's possible, because people use it. Oh, okay. So I just set it up exactly the same as this and it'll recognize it.
Exactly. That's what I've done so far. Another piece of advice for people like you who have lots of smart switches and so speakers, I won't mention her name so she doesn't act up, is to set them up with the guest network instead of your regular network. If you're worried about your privacy and so on, it's not a bad idea to set them up on the guest network so that they don't interact with your devices unless it's absolutely necessary. So that's another thing you can do as well.
Okay. And I didn't bother to check, but I guess it is applicable. It's running 2.4 and 5 gigahertz.
Yes. I mean, in a perfect world, the device will just choose whatever has the most stable connection. 5 gigahertz, as you know, is much faster, but it doesn't go through walls as easily. So some devices, especially smart home devices, if they're not within the line of sight of a 5 gigahertz device, they'll probably have some trouble connecting. So it's usually better to connect them to the 2.4 gigahertz network, because most of these devices don't really need a very fast connection, because they just send and receive little snippets of information. And when they are actually streaming something like music or a video, it's usually in a very low bandwidth. So you don't really need a really fast connection for that.
Yeah. And also, I mean, a lot of the plugs and the switches won't take 5 gigahertz.
Exactly. It's just much more expensive for the manufacturers. And in order to shave a few dollars off the bill of materials, they'll use a standard 2.4 gigahertz connection when possible.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to probably getting them set up at the weekend. But thank you for that, because that's going to save me Sunday.
Yeah, one thing that I would like to recommend as well is these. I don't know if you've seen them. They're called IR blasters or infrared
I've got
blasters.
two. I've got two of
Oh,
them.
excellent. You can turn your devices on and off. I have a whole routine set for when I come into work in the morning. I just say, hey, I'm ready for work. And it turns on different devices and gives me the weather.
The
And mhm,
only downside to that is I have two Daikin air conditioners, both
mhm,
of which are supposedly recognized on that device,
mhm.
but are not recognized on that device.
That's too bad. I'm going to have to
It's
send you the link to the
disappointing.
one that I got, which does work with Daikin devices. I have two of them
Mine,
at home
mine
as
does
well.
work with Daikin. It's got a
Mhm,
whole list of them, but it doesn't
mhm.
pick up my one.
Oh, okay. Maybe mine will. I'll send you a link. Maybe I can
Hmm.
let you even borrow it for a
I think
while.
by the look of it, I think I got the same one you have. I can't
Hmm.
remember what. I'll have a look in a minute. I've got a box somewhere.
Mose is the brand that I'm using. Mose.
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 Oh,
Uh-huh.
okay. Like in Moses.
Exactly.
Right. I tell you what, we're going to be touching today on scams.
Mhm.
And from what I've heard, they've become much more prolific since the lockdown.
Definitely. Since a lot of people are, stuck at home for whatever reason, and they need to do a lot of online shopping for, basic needs,
Hmm.
such as, doing their shopping or their grocery shopping or just basically everything. That means a lot more people at home, a lot more people in less secure networks, because let's face it, a lot of the times people aren't as careful as some companies are with their networks, even though a lot of the big companies have been hit with cyber attacks lately.
Hmm.
It is a fact that most home networks are a little bit less secure, so they present a much bigger attack surface, a bigger target, so to speak. So people who are out there trying to get your money are going to target home users and anybody who's not too tech savvy, or I would say anybody who's not too skeptical of what they see online or whatever. So a little bit of skepticism goes a long way.
Mm.
There's an old Russian saying that I'm probably going to butcher, but it's "Doверяй, not проверяй," which means trust but verify. And it was very popular back in the 80s, with the whole glasnost and everything. And yeah, you should trust in that there's, a lot of e-commerce going on right now, but also verify. Be real careful about how you do business, how you conduct yourself on the internet.
Hmm. Hmm. And one of the things I always find, you often get these emails and they give you a link supposedly to so and so or so and so. What I always do, if you put your mouse, let it hover over the link that they give you, it will actually tell you what the proper link is. And that's the fact, if they're trying to disguise a link, it will show you what the link is. Always be very wary of that. And always sort of check on the exact wording. Sometimes it's quickly to look at something, but they perhaps just change one or two, one letter or one number in the address, and that'll take you somewhere completely different. So just be very vigilant. I mean, for instance, if I get an email from somebody that I know, and it has say a video attachment or any other attachment, if they don't put anything in the text, or it's just a simple check this out or whatever, I don't go anywhere near it. It's as simple as that, because if they can't be bothered to say, "Hey Jerry, I just looked at this. It's from so and so. What do you think?" That's enough for me to do. But if you just get a link with no reasonable explanation, just leave it alone. It's not that
even
important.
then even then there are two things to take into account for for what you're saying. The first one is that there's something called cyber squatting. It's like squatters are for like land. Well, cyber squatters
Mm-hmm.
do the same thing by registering domain names that look a lot like the original ones. I was on the Banconal or Banco Nacional podcast the other day, and it's curious that the word Banconal has an L in it. And
Mm-hmm.
the uppercase I looks a lot like a lowercase L. So somebody
Absolutely.
could register banconai.com and
Mm-hmm.
send you a link where the I is a capital I
Mm-hmm.
and it looks like an L. So even then, one thing that I usually tell people is that if you get an email from any institution like your bank or your e-wallet or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that, read it, don't ignore it, but then go to the website and type the address yourself instead of clicking on any links that are on the thing itself, so that you can make sure that you're actually going to the place that you're going to. And if you have any doubts, look at your cards. There's usually a number there. Look at the website. There's usually a number there. Go ahead and give them a call and talk to a human and, get some information out of them. If somebody calls you from any of these institutions or anything like that, take all the information they give you, but don't give them any information back or confirm any information. Tell them you're going to call the bank back or whatever, and then get somebody on the line to do that. But make sure it's the phone number that is on the website or the card or anything trustworthy. One thing to take into account is that there's a lot of what's called man-in-the-middle phishing attacks. What they do is they call your bank and tell them, hey, I think there might be some sort of a weird charge on my card. And then they call you, and then they bridge the call. And they listen in on the call where the bank says, okay, so how may I help you? You say you have some sort of a charge or whatever. And you go like, yeah, okay, so what do I do? And they ask you for the usual verification information and whatever. And you think the call comes from the bank, but it doesn't really. You can fake caller ID nowadays, depending on where you are. So it's usually better if you get a call from the bank, tell them, okay, I'll take that into account, and then hang up and call back yourself. It's always better to do that. So be careful about that.
Sure. And a bank will never ask you to give any kind of password or PIN or anything over the telephone. In actual fact, I was talking to an organization, it's a while ago now. It was discussing something to do with a charge. And the first thing that the person on the other end of the line says, I am not going to ask you for any PINs or passwords, so please do not mention them.
Yeah, that's great to know.
Yeah, and that's but yeah, I mean, just be very, very cautious. Things, I mean, they're getting much more sophisticated, aren't they, in the way that they operate? And of course, now we're also seeing the scam doesn't necessarily mean to, it's like, well, I mean, in a way, hacking is type of scam. They, if they get access to your computer. So in some ways, you can't even trust your computer, can you?
Well, it's difficult to trust. You have to be careful and verify before you trust anything. And just be sure to make sure that you're talking to whoever you have to talk to. And this not only applies to banks, this also applies to your own company as well. For example, I've seen a lot of cases where somebody's password is guessed, or they, fill a form online thinking that they're actually getting to their email or whatever because they get a link or something like that. And the attacker doesn't go into full, attack mode right then and there. What they do is they monitor the email to see if you correspond with anybody with any position of financial decision-making power. So that, for example, they figure out that your controller or your accountant or whatever is named so-and-so and whatever. And then they try to make that person agree to something that will financially be, bad for you by pretending to be you. So one other thing to keep in mind is, just like your bank will ask you for a second form of some authentication, like, a security question or a PIN number or something like that, any decisions that have to do with money in your company, just be very careful and double check using something else instead of just hitting reply. Pick up the phone and call, use an instant messaging app, or send a new email back to that person from your email program saying, hey, did you send me this or whatever, just to make sure. I've seen cases where people have lost, 5 figures because they got an email that was spoofed, and they transferred money somewhere else than they should, and then they can't get their money back after that. So it's really, really important for people to be wary about those things. More so now that people are buying and selling online a lot of stuff that, stuff that they don't need, and they sell it online. They're getting hit by people who pay them by checks with no funds. But the problem is that those take 3 or 4 days to not clear. And then you get stuck with not only having lost your item that you were selling, but also getting stuck with a bank fee for a check that you didn't cut. So that's something to watch out for. Even more so if you're doing something internationally. I've heard of cases where people are selling their cars. Say you're selling your old car for $15,000 and somebody says, I'm going to wire you $20,000 to take it to the border and give it to somebody who's going to sell it in Costa Rica, for example. And you say, hey, $5,000 for a trip to Chiriquí, that's not so bad. So you go ahead and you deliver the car. And then when you come back 21 days later, it looks like the transfer didn't go through because it didn't really have any funds, and you're stuck without a car, and you're also stuck with bank fees. So be real careful about that. There's nothing wrong with calling your bank and asking for advice. They will let you know if you need to do anything about it, or if it's legit or not, or when it clears. You can just tell the person, I'll send it to you when it clears, and that's it. Also, if you're buying and selling online, there's a couple of places like, for example, Encuentra 24 that have implemented buyer verification. They go through ID checks and things like that. It gives you an additional layer of protection in case something like this happens. I mean, this is not new. This is something that eBay's done for like decades, and they have like verification, and they have like review systems where if you see a seller has made like 1,000 sales and they get a 99% rating, you can be pretty confident that these people are what they say they are. It's really important for people nowadays who are buying a lot of stuff on Instagram, for example. It's really easy to go on the dark web and buy 20,000 followers and then plagiarize 20 or 30 pictures of people and make them look like they're satisfied customers. And it's even easier nowadays just to steal other people's Instagrams. I've seen cases here in Panama where they will steal other people's Instagram accounts by luring them into thinking that Instagram is going to verify the account and give them a blue check mark, or they send them messages saying, you know what, we're Instagram copyright police, and we're going to close your account if you don't give us all your information. And people actually fall for that, and they give their information over, and somebody takes over their account and then sets it up as a store. One way to find out is if you go to the store and you go to the information on the account, you'll see any previous names that account used to have. If you can't see that information, that is not a real store, in the sense that it's not a commercial account, so there's no accountability. So be careful about that. And overall, if you can ask your family and friends if they've ever purchased something from a store, it's even better for two reasons. One, if you get, actual human references from people that you can trust, it gives you an additional sense of security. And even more so, if the store did a good job or a bad job, you can reward that store or not with your business by, asking not only did the purchase go well, but also any kind of claims, like if you had a warranty issue or if you need service or support, how good were they? So if you get references from other people, that's even better.
And then what are the most common scams going around in Panama at the moment?
At the moment, mostly those scams, like I mentioned, where they'll buy something from you and then, stick you with the bill afterwards for the bank fees. And when people are selling one thing, but they're actually not selling that thing. They're just taking your money. One big scam right now is for PlayStation 5s. There's, a shortage of all sorts of electronic components stemming from the fact that this pandemic hit pretty much during that 1 month long hiatus that they have in China for the New Year festival and whatever. And that just threw everything out of whack. So PlayStation 5s are really scarce right now. And also video graphics cards for gaming enthusiasts or video editors are also scarce. So you'll see a lot of offerings online, and they'll say, oh, you can get a PS5 like 2 for $1,000 or something like that, which is lower than the suggested retail price. And they'll ask you for like a down payment or whatever. And then they'll just close up shop and and go away. And there's a lot of that right now where they take the claims in the police department and whatever. There's a lot of that right now, and people are really, encouraged to, verify these stores before they actually make any kind of a purchase. Also, just be real careful when you're using your card to pay for any deliveries. One thing that I tell people is that if you're going to get a delivery and you can pay online, then do so, because you get better, a better chance to file a claim if something's wrong. But if you do have to pay on the terminal that the person brings, one thing to do is you turn the back of the card and you see that verification number, write it down somewhere safe, and then blot it out with a magic marker or something that's permanent. Because without that little piece of information, that person who's bringing you the delivery can't sell the information to somebody else or use that card online because they're missing that verification number.
Okay.
So I've done that on my cards. I have the number stored somewhere else. And even if I give you my card right now, you can't use it online because it's missing that 3-digit number that's in the back for you to use it.
But that's one of the things that you mentioned. There's always been a bit of a concern to me because, as you know, like yourself, I do buy quite a lot of stuff over the internet. And one of the things that they have to have is they have to have that authorization code. That basically that 4 number, if you got like an American Express, which is on the front, or the 3 number, which is on the back. And I always say, well, once they've got that information, can't they then just go and buy with my card because they've got both the number of the card and that authentication number?
Yes and no. The thing is, a lot of these websites will take that information and then relay it to the service provider that does the collecting for them and not store it. A lot of places used to store it, and then they got hit by, hackers and whatever. And that kind of put everything on hold. And then what they started doing, and what most people are doing now, is not storing any information. Not only because it's a good idea, but also because laws in a lot of countries have been very stringent about how you store that information. So a lot of the times, the information that does get stored is the fact that you authorized that store to charge you for something. So that gets stored as a special key or a special token that has none of the original information in there, just like a digital signature that says, you know what, Gerry's shopped here at Amazon for years, so he set up his credit card, so we're going to have authorization to charge his credit card, even though we're not going to ask for that information. That being said, you may have run into a situation where after a couple of years of using it, Amazon will ask you for that information back because their key or their token has expired, and they have to kind of renew that vow with you and the collecting agent. In this case, they're called merchant services or merchant accounts or whatever. So from time to time, you will get a prompt to ask for that information back, just to do kind of a re-signing of that token so it's still valid for a couple more months.
Here's a question regarding storing personal data. Like, we hear, oh, so-and-so's been hacked and 500,000 information of people have been stolen from the server. Well, why isn't that information on the server encrypted?
Usually it is. The thing is, a lot of the times, the information gets stolen or captured or whatever, but by something called scraping. For example, if you go to the TBS GerryD Instagram page, you can see information like how many followers it has, what followers are following it, what accounts the TBS GerryD account is following, and so on. That's information that's quote unquote publicly available. And even though places like Instagram do their best work to try to avoid people automating the task of grabbing that information, sometimes it does happen. I mean, the latest LinkedIn quote unquote hack involved somebody scraping all of that information for fun. And there's a lot of information that's on our LinkedIn page that is available to the public. Passwords were not a part of that information leak, but if I have enough information on where you've worked and what your name is and what your accomplishments are and what your strengths are professionally, I
Mm-hmm.
could use that information to maybe call you and try to scam you out of something. I could say, hey, you don't know me, but I worked with so and so, which is, a place where you worked or whatever, and I need you to do this for me or that for me or whatever. They could pretend to have a lot of information. You've probably seen videos where people sit down with a supposed psychic, and the psychic says, and you have a dog, and his dog, the dog's name is so and so, and you like walking in the park and whatever, and they say, oh, this person really could tell all of this stuff without knowing me.
Mm-hmm.
And when they pull back the curtain, there's somebody sitting on Facebook just looking at their Facebook feed and feeding the psychic through an earpiece, saying, this is all the stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that out there that's linked to you, that even though these information leaks don't include any sensitive, like, password information, they do include enough information to, maybe, if you're not wary enough, if you don't verify things, take advantage of you in some way. So you have to be careful about that.
I mean, I think the thing as well is the thing to remember is that when we're looking at protecting, for instance, our computer, we use security software. If you've got Windows, it may come, it's already loaded with the Windows. Me personally, I'm always running Malwarebytes because I always find it gets that little bit deeper into what's happening on your computer. So these systems, these software devices, they can safeguard, pretty well your computer from getting hacked into or whatever. But you've got to remember that scams, they're down to you personally. That's not down. There is no software, unfortunately, right now that is going to detect a scam and tell you don't reply to this email. It's down to you to be vigilant. And of course, what can happen is if you're not vigilant, you can give people enough information that they can then go and hack your computer. And
That is correct. That being said, there is one type of software that you can use. And in this case, that software is mental. It's education. If you educate people, then the software in your brain will be smarter and you won't fall for these scams. One way to do that is a website called KnowBe4. That's KNOWBE, the number 4.com. At knowbe4.com, you can set up a test and send up to, I think it was 100 emails to, like, your customers or your friends or whatever in your company. And they will send fake emails to them, trying to get them to click on things. And when they do, they go to a video that trains them and says, hey, you know what? This time it's just a test, but this is what you need to know. And they will, educate people in a way that, helps you not to fall for these scams, especially in a corporate environment, because in a corporate environment, you not only handle information that's yours, you usually also handle information that belongs to your vendors or to your customers, who you are responsible for in lots of ways. So you have to be real careful about that. Another tip that I can give you is there's a page called virustotal.com. And what it does is it incorporates the engines from the most the best antivirus engines in the market, like dozens of them. And it allows you to either type in a link that somebody sent you or upload an attachment that somebody sent you before you open it. And it will scan it with all of these tools just to make sure that it is what it says it is. Or if it's a menace, it will tell you why, since when it's a menace, who detects it, what it does to your system, what files it alters in any way, so that even if you did, or somebody in your company also did open it, you'll know how to fix it, and if there are any antidotes to it or any way to get it off your system if you made the error of clicking on it in the first place. That's virustotal.com. Also, one other way that people are getting scammed is that the hackers use something called password stuffing, which is basically, if you are the victim of a leak because one company stored your passwords without encryption, a lot of the times these leaks will be used to try that same username and password on other services. So let's say your Netflix account is GerryD at gmail.com or whatever, and you use the same password for Netflix as you do for your email. And then Netflix gets, for whatever reason, hacked or whatever. It's the reason why when Disney Plus came out, like a week later, there were like 30,000 or so many million accounts or whatever being sold on the black market for Disney Plus. And people said, somebody hacked my Disney Plus account. No, you use the same password you used for your Yahoo Mail in 2012 when it was hacked. So somebody just tried the same password and it worked. So please don't use the same password for every service. There are paid services like 1Password and LastPass and NordPass and so on. And there are free services that will allow you to save your passwords and generate safe passwords for each and every one of your services and keep them under master key password, or even in some cases, some sort of a USB device that you can keep your passwords in and use it like a physical hardware key. So that's also important to take into account. That makes you a lot less vulnerable and makes the hackers just move on to the next target.
I agree. I've been using one for a long time. The main reason was because firstly, I wanted to generate serious passwords, in other words, passwords which are much harder to decrypt, but also because, like you say, we need passwords now for so many different things, and to avoid using the same one. Oh, am I going to remember? What I do for really, really mundane accounts, yeah, I use a particular password which is there, but it's not used for anything else other than something which is completely mundane and you can't get access to anything else. And I use I use a Dashlane password manager. I found that to be very good. It's on my phone, it's on my laptop, and it's good because it will generate password. It does tell you if there's anybody that's been using a password that you've got, and it does generate pretty strong passwords. And I've been using it for a few years now, and found it to be pretty good. Saves my brain.
Yeah, and we all need all the help that we can get. Now, if you're wanting to generate smarter, stronger passwords, you can use tools like Dashlane or whatever, or you can also use a method that I've always recommended, which is just pick a phrase or a poem or a line from a song or whatever, because it's not so much a matter of password complexity as it is more of a password length issue, because computers don't really care about letters and numbers and symbols and whatever.
The thing is, especially they can say, okay, password between 8 and 24. And the other one is you type out a phrase and they said, oh, yes, but you've got to have a character in it and you've got to have this in it and you've got to have upper and lower case. You've got to have a character, you've got to have a number, whatever. And you think, well, that screws up the whole idea of me remembering what it is.
Unfortunately, it does, but that's kind of old style thinking. There's a really nice comic from a very prolific artist called XKCD that does comics about math and physics and science and whatever. And you can look it up on Google if you look up the words correct horse battery staple. Because the phrase correct horse battery staple is long enough that it takes thousands of years to crack on, even the most powerful computers right now. But if I imagine a horse saying that's a staple and somebody saying correct on a battery or whatever, I just make a mental picture and I'll never forget correct horse battery staple. You can pick things like, I don't know, song lyrics. Welcome to the jungle. We've got fun and games. That is so long that it would take literally tens of thousands of years to, crack. And even if I forget, I just look up words to, welcome to the jungle on the internet and I'll find out what it was. And that applies to security questions as well. I don't know if you remember something called the Fappening. It was like an event where I think it was Jennifer Lawrence's information was gotten off of iCloud because somebody guessed all the information in her security questions from Wikipedia. So pick something else like Batman. And when it asks who your favorite teacher was, say Alfred. City you were born in, Gotham, something like that. And if you forget, you can always look it up.
All right, and watch the cartoon. Alex, as always, thank you so very much. Very informative morning this morning. And, keep up the good work. Keep working. It's nice to see you with a smile on your face. And don't forget, you can catch Alex. When's your next program?
That's today at 7 p.m. on RPC.
All right. There, I'll go and catch Alex on there. And you can actually look at him.
Even though I've got a face for radio.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. Computer AlexNeuman with us this morning, as always. Thanks so very much, Alex. And we'll be